Welcome to another edition of Minot Matters here at the Dakota, brought to you by Shock, Safe, and Lock. I'm Jonathan Starr. Today, I'm joined by another very special guest who is new to the area again.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're from this side of the world.
Yeah. So I grew up just down the road in Velva, North Dakota.
I
spent a lot of time in Minot just by virtue of the things you do when you're a teenager. So, the fair just finished up, and I have lots of crazy memories from those days there. Of course, I had to go walk through the mall the other day and reminisce about those times.
Yeah, for sure.
But as I think about this transition and this opportunity to come back to Minot and work with another Hostfest, I've been thinking a lot about my own family. My wife and I are currently living in Morris, Minnesota. Before that, we were in Valley City.
Do you have like a private jet to get to work every day?
I wish
How does
that
that work?
I know that we'll talk about commuting at the next episode. But anyway, we have one daughter, and she's 6 years old, and in those really impressionable years. And not that long ago, Jonathan, we were at a place, and this gentleman said, "Well, if you want to take your daughter on a ride on this golf cart, give it a shot." And so I put her in between my legs, and I let her drive. And it was crazy. I mean, she's over here and she's over there.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, and I think most of your listeners can relate, at age 6, we're like delivering stuff to our parents out in the fields or driving the tractor or running to town for groceries, right?
Yep. That's the North Dakota way.
That's the North Dakota thing, right?
Yep.
And I think the idea that, some of those kinds of experiences and the ways that, I really loved growing up here, I'm just excited to bring those into her world as well.
Absolutely.
So,
Whole different world.
Very different, yeah.
Velva, the home of Dots Pretzels, and in your words, Eric Severide.
Eric Severide, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So, what is Velva to you? When you look at Velva, what is it?
Yeah, I grew up. My dad was one of 8 kids.
Okay.
And so we lived on the farm just on the edge of town. And when people talk about my dad's childhood, it's this big table. And 8 kids come, and after school, they all might bring 2 or 3 friends, but there's always enough room, right? There's always enough food. There's always enough. And in the stories you hear about the fun and those interactive kind of like coming of age stories from that time. And it didn't change when they became adults because they all stayed there.
Wow. And
so when we would get together, and we'd get together like every day. I mean, It was like, we get together for this birthday and this holiday and after church on Sundays. And the point was all of my best friends were my cousins. And so we'd run around and build forts and play in the woods and do all these things that are they're these romantic things that we all think about when we think about childhood. But I think for me, just growing up in Velva and in these small communities, there's just a connectedness in a way in which you can learn, you can make mistakes.
Yep.
But more importantly, when those mistakes are made, there's this beautiful network of people there watching out to make sure that you only make this much. Of a mistake.
Don't go too far.
And I just loved it. I loved it. And I think that the spirit of that is still alive. Our world looks very different than it did 30 years ago. But the point is, I think the spirit of that is still very alive here. And it's really fun to kind of acclimate to that world again.
That's something you, and we still have a couple other things to talk about, but that's something that you are fighting almost directly with your role in the Hostfest, where you're trying to match up 2 different worlds. And it's fantastic. It's got to be a great experience because it's really cool. It's a challenge, but it's something when you have the finished product, it's really cool. As you have this older generation that the heritage meant a lot, and it feels like the younger generation does not always buy into those conversations of heritage.
Yeah. That's a really, really great point. People keep saying, we need to figure out a way to engage the young people. And I think for me, one of the challenges in that statement is, if this event's been around for 45 years, right? For 45 years, there have been old people and young people, right? And every year that goes by, a generation drops off and a new one enters in. I think for me, I choose to believe that we're all going to get old someday. And so in that context, there's plenty of audience for the nature of this heritage message that really I think is at the crux.
Yeah.
But I think that to your point, Jonathan, I think the question really fundamentally is, what does that mean to the generations that we have yet to engage?
Right.
If things like 23andMe are real products that people are, right?
They're very interested about.
You think about the TV show The Vikings. You think about all these, historical fiction TV shows and all these ways in which we are pondering about the past, but we don't do it in maybe the traditional or the more academic fashion that the older generation might see it.
Right.
I think those are real, and I think for me there's these cultural premises that are the base foundation for the nature why this has been successful. And re-gearing those in a more interactive, thoughtful, and audience-specific way is the key. That, for me, is the key.
Way to go deep.
Thanks. I just spent my wife is from Minnesota, and so we have this annual pilgrimage to the Minnesota State Fair, which I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that in mine. Am I allowed to talk about
Nope.
it?
There's only one state fair in the United States.
So there is another state fair that we won't talk about. But, I think that the nature of how that culture has emerged here as well, right, is what we think about in terms of events, how do we engage people in this whimsical manner, where it is, it's memorable. There are these places where you learn something you didn't know. There is entertainment, and more importantly, I think the thing that we really need to dig down to is engagement.
Right?
How do we engage in a real way? But at the end, the foundation of the event never changes. It's always about the heritage. It's always about this shared Nordic culture that we all are deeply rooted in this area and really proud of, right? Maybe our generation doesn't talk about it the same way, but you ask somebody what their heritage is.
Yeah.
I choose to believe 9 times out of 10 we know generally.
You're asking the wrong person. All right, I know my heritage to a point, and this is the really interesting part. As I was thinking about this interview and preparing for it, I know in my heritage we came over on the old covered wagons. I'm saying it wrong, but whatever. I was part of my fathers or forefathers or distant relatives were part of the Oregon Trail game. They helped create it, right? By being on the original Oregon Trail. They probably went to North Dakota potentially on their way to Oregon, and that's eventually where they stopped on the West Coast. But then as far as looking into your bloodlines and stuff like that, for me it becomes a very melting pot of a lot of different representations. And I think that part is interesting because North Dakota originally very much Swedes, very much Norwegians, very much specific Germans. Cannot leave out the Germans.
Russia,
very specific. And now as you develop, because of the oil boom, because of growth in general, it's turning where it's becoming a very melting pot. You have a region that was heavily Catholic, heavily Lutheran, and now it still has those strong tenets, but again, things are changing. It's being very dynamic in the growth, and I think that's probably. And I say challenge, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't matter whatever your job is. You should be facing a challenge. Otherwise, go find a new job, right?
Yeah, right.
So it's not that it's an impossibility or something like, oh, this is the end. But by saying challenge, it's more like, okay, how do we adjust while maintaining? And I think it's really cool that you said that our core foundational fundamentals of what the Hostfest is not changing. It's the Nordic culture. We're going and representing that. Mm-hmm. I think that's important for people to see. But do you kind of, as I talk about that heritage and stuff like that, are those some of the things that potentially, as you step into this role, we jumped right into the deep end. We didn't even go through but as you step into this role, some of the things that you potentially see coming at you down the road of how to engage this.
I've been on a month. I'm on the job for a month. Let's take the gloves off. Let's
go fight.
Right? Let's do it.
Yeah.
But I think to the point of your question, anytime we leave our homes, right, we need to know what it is that we're going to go do and how it is that engagement and that experience will really happen. And I think I really liken this a lot. I keep using the fair analogy, but I really liken this to a fair, right? You go hoping that you'll bump into somebody right? You go knowing that there's
cheese curds,
great food, right there with me, right?
Right.
Great food. You go thinking that you're going to learn something. You go thinking there's going to be entertainment and something that you can talk about on Monday morning when you get back to work. Those things are the foundational premise for any activity out there. And I think some organizations, they do it bigger because they have been able to evolve over decades and built these cultures and really honor the nature of how that execution happens. That's, Jonathan, that's where we are. Mm-hmm. That's our biggest challenge right now is that evolution. It for 40 years the Norsk Hostfest evolved, and it evolved under very, patriarchal leadership. This family and a few really key people. They shepherd this thing along from year to year, and absolutely. It became this beautiful thing. But then the world stopped, And for 2 years, we wondered what the fate
That's
of
a
how
shock.
things are going to work, just in general, let alone Hostfest. I mean, so I think what we're really finding is this sort of general plea with the community just to be patient with us, right? We are
Absolutely.
working through these transitions because again, the shoes that we have to fill, they're
enormous,
even bigger than I can imagine. But the point is, there are dreams, and I think, for more importantly, what blows my mind, we haven't really touched on this, is the people. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is not operated and ran by an office of folks that is sitting someplace in Minot. It is all these volunteer groups, all these churches that bring their bazaar goods, and all of these vendors and artisans who bring those Nordic crafts and
from around the world.
Nailed it. Yep. All over the place. I mean, they come here in their own sort of realm of ownership, right? This event has been a part of their bloodline for so long that they come. And they think about the Hostfest as like a family reunion, right? They think about this event as part of this thing that you do, just like we go to every Christmas. We get together with some people that we love, but we don't love, and it's great and wonderful. But the point is, I think the people in this is that, as in my first month, that is the thing that's blowing me away, is how much ownership that this community has taken in this event.
I think that the larger impact of what and I'm saying it wrong. You say it right, but the Hostfest. I have my western part of the United States accent on that. The larger impact of the Hostfest, how that it is a global event. This isn't something. Even the state fair sometimes feels like it's a Minot thing, but it's not. That is way bigger than Minot. But the Hostfest is even bigger than that in some regards, and I think that gets lost in the younger generation that I am a part of the effect of it. You guys are making a world impact.
Yeah. No.
Do you feel that responsibility?
I do. That element of like global, I think the execution of how do we honor that historic, the significance of how far-reaching this event is. That one's I'm still working on that in terms of how we conquer that, how we continue that, how we evolve into really fully utilizing this piece. But yeah, absolutely.
Do you feel like it's grasped by locals fully?
The idea, how big.
Yeah, and you're 1 month on the job. Maybe that's a little bit early to ask.
And that's on the list of things to navigate in the weeks ahead. I mean, I think as the event executes, that is one of the pieces that we're watching for, right? Yeah. How do we think about that aspect and really provide those experiences where we're not just interacting with ourselves, but a big world outside of this community. So
we jumped right into the deep end. I didn't even formally introduce you. I'm sitting down with Searle Swedlund, Executive Director at Norsk Hostfest. You were hired earlier this year, first month on the job. Yeah. You mentioned already, most recently, you're from Minnesota. Of course, you grew up in Velva. Wife was from Minnesota. Former Executive Director at Jamestown Tourism.
Correct, yeah.
And then you were the Community Development Specialist at Upper Minnesota Valley Regional Development Commission. There has to be an acronym that was used because that's way too long.
There is, yeah. There's lots of acronyms in that pseudo-government world.
Yes. So why come back to North Dakota? Why come back to Minot?
I mentioned a little bit before. I mean, just the connections and the people.
Yeah.
I mean, the capacity to make those impacts and differences. I was well versed with the Hostfest and certainly with the community. But
did you have to relearn how to say it, or did you already know?
There's a gentleman in this community who has coached me a little bit. So.
I love it.
I think growing up, you see all those vowels and think, well, just throw a couple extra in there. It'll be just fine.
Hostfest.
Everyone knows what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
No, yeah, I had to work on that a little bit, but I think there's an allure, right, for me,
right.
And in that I mentioned a little bit about my childhood, my upbringing, my connections, just in North Dakota in general, and just excited to be back.
Well, it's great to have you back.
Oh, thank you.
I think one of the most incredible things about North Dakota that I talk about too often on our podcast is how Minot and this north central part always pulls people back. They leave and they finally get to explore the great world that is beyond North Dakota and realize, I'll go back. And I think that's an interesting thing that happens. So it's good to have you back. Now, you mentioned that you have a very long commute right now. Has to be several hours.
Yeah.
So how's that going? You going to be moving to the area, or are you going to make the commute?
Yeah, we'll be making the move. As often things are, there's just a lot of variables. But the focus right now for me is to spend any energy and time I can spend on helping the staff that's in place execute the festival. And after that, like, we'll have time to navigate those big decisions that come with a big move. So.
Right, and you've been involved in nonprofit organizations. Mentioned them, Jamestown Tourism, there for almost 10 years. At the I'll make up an acronym, UMVRDC.
You got it. That's the right one.
There we go. You were there for a year, 2 years as well. Why? There's probably a lot of options that you could have out there. Why Norsk Hostfest? What was the allure to go work with that organization?
I mean, before that, I was at Concordia College in Moorhead.
Right.
And, as a product of liberal arts education,
Mm-hmm.
there's only a few places, it seems like, left in this world where problem solving, critical thinking, listening, hearing, that whole problem solving element, is really alive and well. And I looked at the event and the nature of the things that I've done and the things that I love to do.
Yeah.
Just being connected to a larger community and thinking about how we can collaborate, work together, really build something special and unique by the way we do it together. Right.
Right.
Then and I think that all those elements were just seemed very alive and well in this opportunity.
Moving on, I want to talk about the unique transition that the Norsk Hostfest has had to. How do you say it? I'm saying Hostfest. I should have done I don't want this guy in the community. Hust. That's the key. That's the key. Hostfest. Hostfest. I feel like that's good for everybody watching because nobody says it right at mine.
Hostfest. Hugh.
Hostfest.
Hostfest. Yep.
Hostfest. Are you is there training videos on the website just on how to say it?
That's one of the things I'm thinking about doing this year is grabbing a couple of videos and just having people go around and say it, just nice tight stuff with the mouth, right? Just to see how we can leverage that going forward.
I love that. You guys face a lot of challenges this year with the deal that went on with Epic, and that's a separate deal that we don't need to talk about directly, but there was an effect that it had on your guys' organization and on making sure that the event could execute in 2024. What has been some of the challenges or maybe even some of the bright sides that you've encountered month on the job?
I think that the challenge in any relationship is it's about a promise, right? And so you have this team of folks who have been, a part of this event for several years now.
Right.
And the promises were made about how the event would execute, the nature of how those people would be involved in the event. And right now, we're just really trying to dig through and navigate what promises were made to who and how can we really honor that
Makes
going
sense.
into this event. And I think people have been really generous, right? People have been very gracious and understanding. But a promise is a promise. It doesn't matter. And I think for us, like, that is really a key and point number one as we navigate, the weeks that are ahead before the event executes. Is how do we really live up to the things that are really important to people and those promises that were made.
It's got to be a huge challenge. Beyond that, obviously, you have the event itself. Were there any difficulties as you transition, or was it pretty much a smooth transition from, okay, they're doing it, to now it's on the shoulders of Searle? Yeah,
and I would say it's on the shoulder. So I talked a little bit before about how connected the people in the community are.
Absolutely.
I'm just blown away that everyone just seems to know what their job is when the event happens.
Yeah.
When I lived in Valley City and worked in Jamestown, there's this little town called Streeter down the road, and they had a buffalo feed. Streeter's maybe, nice. I don't know, on a good day when everyone's home, maybe like 250, 300 people.
Yeah.
But they'd host this buffalo feed for, I don't know, a couple thousand people would show up.
Wow.
And the point is, I bumped into this gentleman who I knew, and I said, "Oh, you volunteered for this?" He says, "Yeah, I was sitting in my office one day, and this guy showed up, and I was like, this is great. I'm connecting with the community. People are coming to see me." And he said to me, "Yeah, your job for the bison feed will be to wash dishes from 6 to 8. So here's what you need to do and how you need to do it."
That's right? The best job.
My point is, like, there's this piece about this whole community. They just know their job, right?
Yeah.
We all just know it. So it's not Searle or the staff or the board of directors saying, "Hey, everybody, here's what you have to do." It's not that, right?
Right.
It's just that everybody's so empowered and so connected that they come in and they tell you, "Well, here's how it works and here's what we need." And then it's our job to manage those logistics. And we have a staff that has been in place throughout all of this transition that we talk about, and they are just magnificent. We have a board of directors who's been in position through all this transition, and they are equally as magnificent.
It's good to have a good board of directors.
And, that's just it. All you can hope in this world is have really good people, and that I really feel fortunate. This organization's got some really great people.
4-day event happening end of September. You've got some big concerts that you've booked. And I want to talk about that. Like these concerts, Gaelic Storm and Texas Tenors, and then there's Church of Cash, which is a tribute to Johnny Cash, the Fab Four, which is a tribute of sorts to the Beatles, Trace Adkins, Jay Leno, Ryan Bingham, Garrison Keillor. You have these fantastic things, but this is like a secondary thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like two different events.
Right.
Right. I mean, when we talk about this, it's just what I'm learning is so fascinating is we spend a lot of our time talking about the entertainment.
Right.
We spend a lot of our time talking about these beautiful headliners that are coming to our community that we get to enjoy. Right. That's really special. But then like you said, I mean, the event was sort of rooted in this heritage aspect, and all of that is happening, in tangent with these concerts. And the best I can tell in my time on here is this event started just as it was like the 150th anniversary of the beginning of a migration from Norway.
Wow.
And in year 2 or 3, this guy by the name of Myron Florin shows up and plays his accordion for all these Scandinavians. And
interesting.
The world blows up, right?
They love it.
It shifts from just let's get together and eat some really great food to let's really celebrate.
Right, yeah.
And I think that tradition has kept on over these years. The nature of the entertainment also has sort of evolved. But yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of folks, we talk about the generational values in an event like this. And, for a lot of folks, eating rumagrut and lefse and lutefisk, that's one thing, but getting in there and like really enjoying an entertainer that they love, I mean, that's another. And so it has these really special elements that feel competing, but in the sense really complement really well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the concerts are almost more for the locals. The ones coming in from wherever are going to enjoy them, but the locals probably aren't going to the Hostfest unless there's a really great concert. Now, there's certain that would, but others that may be less. All right, you mentioned lefse. Are you a fan?
Yeah. How do you eat it?
Well, that's fair. I pretty much only eat it fresh, and when I do eat it, butter with sugar. Gotta have sugar.
That's sacrilege.
Okay, whatever sugar there is there, and cinnamon with it is fantastic as well.
You did it right. Yeah. So the most popular preparation for the most popular presentation for lefse at the Norsk Hostfest is
cinnamon sugar.
Cinnamon sugar. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
So I use brown sugar and butter warmed up for just a second. And
wow. Yeah. It's got to be warm.
Yeah.
So my in-laws go and do a annual deal. Typically it's annual where they make it fresh. And if the opportunity arises where I'm able to be there, that's the best. When it comes right off the little griddle, yeah, and it's just that's perfect. So you enjoy lefse. Obviously the next question is lutefisk.
Oh yeah.
You enjoy lutefisk.
I mean, I grew up, every Christmas Eve, that's what we ate.
Oh man.
I mean, I have to say, in those beginning years, I mean,
that's gotta be brutal.
The preparation of the smell, it was more than a guy could really manage.
Yeah.
My older years, like you have a different.
You just lose your taste, but maybe after COVID, you don't have taste buds.
And the butter, and it just there's something. I mean, done well, it is really delectable.
All right. To be fair, I'm a heavy critic of lutefisk, and about the only part of lutefisk that I've experienced is the smell.
Yeah.
I said that's not for me.
It's I think it gets such a rap. I often think if we compared it more to like a delicacy like sushi or something like that, I think we would our attitudes towards it would have evolved. But the point is,
I wonder where the bad rap came from. Do you believe like the old stories of how it came was because people, the old Vikings or whomever on the ships threw lard on the fish to help it survive, and wow, that's a delicacy.
Your tried and true Norwegians listening would say it would tell you that it really is an American thing, not a Scandinavian.
Okay,
thing. So
interesting. That's very interesting.
It's really interesting. My grandma used to often talk. She would make these what I consider delicacies. It was like potatoes and bread dough and ham, bacon or ham.
Okay.
And I would just think that was the most amazing meal ever made. And of course, she would be like, when I was growing up, we had an opportunity to eat a steak. That was amazing.
Yeah.
This is just like what we had laying around, right? But it's just funny. I think food, Jonathan, food really, it's about enacting the senses. It's about taking you back to a place that that you love, right? That you have memories and people. And I think, I choose to believe a lot of folks, right? They eat lutefisk because there was something about their past that they love, or a connection that they want to relive, and that taste and smell just takes them right back. So
it's not the point of this podcast, but you mentioned that lutefisk is more Americanized, and that's really interesting with food. Is you don't realize how much of it. So I had somebody that was in Italy for a while, and they come back and say, "Yeah, chicken Alfredo that you eat, that's very American. That is not how they do it over there." And you're like, no. You got to understand that is fresh from Italy, and it's not. No, it's very American. That's interesting with our foods. For our Christmas Eve tradition is clam chowder. Some people wouldn't like that, but that's fantastic too. So it's probably not anything to do with Norwegian. I just love clam chowder.
That's awesome.
Moving on, 4-day event, have some fantastic concerts, but that's, like we mentioned, that's not really it's something that grabs attention, but is not really the focus of the event. Mm-hmm. Talk about the experience. And part of this, you're gonna be able to experience it fresh after a couple years of being in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. Talk about that experience. When you walk into the State Fair Center and suddenly you get to see all the neat benches that are carved out of wood, and all the people on stilts walking around, and all the different things that is the Hostfest. Talk about that experience for a minute.
This is, this is nothing that any of us can take credit for. I mean, this is part of this legacy leadership that I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, the Wrighton family, Pam Davey, all those big people who, built this thing over 40 years. Their commitment to transform the State Fair Center into another world.
Right.
I mean, I think that's hard. I mean, I'm going to say that again to your listeners, because I think that it is impossible to convey over the radio, TV, whatever it is, right? Whatever format we're using today.
Right.
The smells, the sights, the sounds, the unique elements. I mean, we're not just putting up some banners and some pictures and calling this Norway or Sweden or Finland,
no,
right?
Not at all.
We are literally using all senses that we have the capacity to use. We are transforming a space, and the commitment of an organization and an event.
Yeah.
I mean, we spend more time transforming the space than the event actually executes. I
mean,
just to give you a sense of that commitment. And for those who have been there, right, it's just what it is, right? And there's always somebody who says, well, something's missing, and that's fair, right? But the point is, think about what is here. And it is mind-boggling.
It is.
They took we have to store all this stuff, so they took me in, and it's a warehouse, and I wouldn't even ask. I wouldn't even want to tell your listeners how big the warehouse is.
It's huge.
It's astronaut. I mean, we spend like a day just moving crates of stuff to the State Fair Center, and then a week plus putting it all up in its respective spaces, so that when we walk in there, we're not walking into a concrete jungle. We are walking into this place that is outside of this world, or outside of this community, this state, right? So
one of the things you mentioned that is obviously a priority in every experience, and that's food. We mentioned the two delicacies of whomever. What are some of the other things that are able to, I'm sure you've seen a vendor list or whatever that's been worked on, or from previous years. What are some of the other things that might be interesting to try out at the Hostfest?
My grandma I could never say it, and she'd always say zut zoop. She said it really fast, and no matter how often I practice it, I can never get it right down. But it's basically a warm or cold fruit soup.
Okay.
Which sounds crazy, but it's really amazing. Rummergrut, I love that. It's it's this sugar flour butter mixture with cinnamon and sugar on top of it that you can't eat much of it, right? You couldn't like. Yeah. You got to be careful, because if you go too big, it's way too rich. And so which is the case for all the foods, right? They're all super
That's
rich. Fair. When I married my Swedish wife, her family makes potato klub.
Okay. I've heard of this.
Okay. So, I mean, it is the most, it's the most, so you take a potato and you deconstruct it, and then you do like a 1/3, 2/3 flour potato combination, and then you pat it back together and boil it just like you would. And there's usually like a ham or a pork or something in the middle.
Okay.
And the first time of course, you might be surprised that the magic ingredient is butter over the top of it all.
Seems like that's common.
Yeah, right. Catching a theme here. But the first time I joined the family and ate my first potato club, I ate one, and I remember thinking like, I might have to lay it on the floor right now and just be there for the next day, right? And I watched them, and they eat like 3 or 4 or 5.
Wow.
But anyway, the point is, there's an art to eating them, and they're really. I mean, again, they transform you and they take you back to this place and this experience that's just magical. So
also, we mentioned the main events, the concerts that are main stage performances, but there's also stuff that's happens, activities that are happening all throughout the event. Yeah. As you've gone through some of those, what are some of the ones that maybe some of the viewers or even you are looking forward to potentially seeing this year? Are you going to be able to see any of them?
Oh yeah,
you're gonna be running around everywhere.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope I see it all.
Yeah, right.
I think the work that our staff has done, and I think one of the evolutions that there's been a lot of intentionality around is thinking about how parents or grandparents can build the children to have their own kind of Hostfest experience.
Okay.
And so the Magic City Lions Club has made some really generous donations to help program and build a stage on the second floor that is just all kids, right?
Oh,
it's
wow.
all for them. And I've got a 6-year-old. There's this thing called Cuckoo. It used to be Cuckoo Kangaroo, and they're just crazy. And that's part of the experience. And if you've got a young kid, like that particular entertainer is like a big deal.
Right.
But I think that I'm really excited to see how that young person element fits and how we can really continue to build on those opportunities for young people to come. Kids are free to go to this event, right?
Oh, wow.
This is not when you think about the cost to get to the Norsk Hostfest, it's something. But the point is, for a family to do this, I hope that they look at the ticket and go, there are ways to navigate that, especially when they have a large family that they might want to bring with.
Right, absolutely. So you're gonna have Midwest Murder Podcast gonna be there.
Lots of accordions.
A fan favorite. Gordy Crazy Fingers Lindquist. You'll see him coming around. The Cloggers, that's also something that's kind of interesting.
Molly B is she's like a superstar in her own right.
Okay.
And people will travel here just for her. She's
wow.
really remarkable.
Wow. Cuckoo, as you mentioned. Any other acts that you want to break right now?
The Water Brothers.
But one that you haven't announced yet. Any brand new? Do you got any breaking news you want?
On the website, but there's this young man who has taught himself how to play piano.
Interesting.
By watching YouTube videos.
Wow.
I have not been able to get out there to see his YouTube presence, but I think he will captivate our audience. I mean, he is just really
good,
impressive.
Yeah. So. That's pretty cool. Obviously, just a huge event, pretty spectacular. As people locally, obviously, we won't hit the worldwide audience with this. Maybe some of them get excited; they'll find us. But as people locally and throughout the state of North Dakota consider their venture to the Hostfest and whether or not they want to make that, what's kind of your message to them?
I think. Be prepared for a really friendly atmosphere. Be prepared for people who you couldn't imagine you could know to interact with you like they do. I think there's an interaction amongst people there that is it's just really different, really special, really really
real,
fun. Very real. I think that's the exact right word. And again, we can talk about entertainment, but to be transformed into a space, right? I think when I think about experiences, I want to go in and the things that I remember the best are the ones where the smells are reminiscent, right? The sights are reminiscent, and all my senses are sort of stimulated, simultaneously. And I think that for things that are for those who are sort of on the fence about what this really is, I just can't begin to reiterate enough. It's not just about the food. It's not just about the music. It's not just about, the vendors and the artistry and the heritage. It's about the atmosphere and the energy. And it's just impossible to really explain that in any really modern marketing tool, right? You have to experience it to really understand.
Once YouTube makes it where we can start experiencing smell, right. As well as video. With maybe we could begin to get to the level of what the Hostfest will be, September 25th to 28th later this year. So you guys almost beginning of September, you guys are almost having to start build out the State Fair Center.
I think we move all our stuff on the 15th.
The 15th.
I think that is just a run, just an absolute
10 days of just craziness
to get it all.
Yeah.
There.
So this is interesting as we're coming to the close here. It's probably not interesting. It's interesting to me. My youth group used to help straighten all the chairs after the concerts.
Is that right?
Yeah. So that was my experience at the Hostfest. I remember the Hostfest by making sure there's, I don't know, maybe they still use this system, 2 bricks with a line on it.
Oh, really?
String line. You go and put it at one end of the chairs. You go and put the brick at the other end. Everything's tape marked. And so then you go move it to the line, make sure the line is straight. Nothing is pushing it out.
That sounds like Scandinavian ingenuity.
Yeah, that's right. So a couple hour or so, you have enough hands and all the chairs are straight, ready for the next concert.
Oh my gosh. These are the things that keep me up at night. I don't know who's doing that, but I assume like the youth group is already taking charge of it, like you say, right?
Yeah. And another thing that I once enjoyed about the Hostfest was the Gaither vocal band. So maybe that's something that we should put down the short list, maybe of trying to get them back. Yeah. So that's something for you to consider in 2025 is Gaither vocal band. I'm sure there's a lot of other people that have some input on the artist. That's probably where you get too much input.
I'll take
almost
all the input I can get.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on today.
Thanks so much, Jonathan.
Appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. Looking forward to the Norsk Hostfest. I said it wrong. He says it right, but it's happening September 25th to 28th later this year. Make sure that you grab your tickets. You can go to hostfest.com. That's HOST. You don't even have to have the special accent on the O. It's just HOSTFEST.com, and you can grab your tickets and show up. So
appreciate it. Thanks.
Should be a good time. Appreciate you coming on. This has been another episode of Minot Matters here at the Dakota, brought to you by Shock, Safe, and Lock. I'm Jonathan Starr. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Join the Dakota community as we have great, interesting conversations almost every day. Thanks for watching this. Have a great day.